Finally, The Rock has come back! But before The Rock talks about that, before The Rock talks about anything else, first thing is history. We all know what happened to The Rock. Shut your mouth and look at The Rock. Read The Rock's lips. Let The Rock break it down. It's real simple. The Rock will bring the history. You bring that candy. Simply electrifying. It's gonna be a classic. But first things first.
Share, subscribe, and turn on that damn notification button.
Jabroni.
During Urza's block qualifying season, I'd gone through some other decks like Scroll Prison, wasn't truly happy with them, even if I'd top 8'd a couple times. Into that season, I had theorized about putting Hermit with Plague Lord instead of Deranged Hermit with Opposition. And then I saw then unfamiliar name, later Hall of Famer, Jelger Wiegersma from the Netherlands, win a PTQ with that. I'm like, hey, okay, that's what I was thinking about doing. This can apparently work. So for the last PTQ I could play in my area, I sleeved that up and ended up top 8. Just surrounded it with the Yavimaya Grangers and Elders that got you more lands and just other, good green and black Urza's block cards, such as Diabolic Servitude, kind of the poor player's recurring nightmare. Ended up top 8ing, lost there to an Enchantress deck I was ill prepared to face, but this can work. Then came rotation. So Tempest block is gone, can't play Survival the Fittest anymore. Mercadian Masks is in. What am I going to do now? Well, Mercadian Masks was quite weak, and of course, the Urza's block cards were also better than most of the 4-set cards. So I just took my block constructed deck, replaced the bad 2-mana Elves with Birds of Paradise, threw a couple Dust Bowls in there, and boom, that's my standard deck for Urza block plus Mercadian Masks plus, I guess it would be 6th edition standard.
So The Rock just wants to say it's good to be here being interviewed finally by someone normal.
It held up pretty well in the meta because unusually the default aggro deck wasn't red with reach like burn spells. It was mono green stompy. And once a Plague Lord is down, considering damagement on the stack back then, just as Mog Fanatic was much better with damage on the stack, so was Plague Lord, because now all your creatures are Mog Fanatics, kind of. And that was really good against a deck that only attacks on the ground and has no direct damage. And it held up well enough against kind of the rest of the meta.
Live TV, let's move on.
All this was set against the backdrop of pro wrestling's Attitude Era, where the biggest stars were, it was 2 guys, Stone Cold Steve Austin and Dwayne Johnson, The Rock. So obviously, before he was the famous actor, he was the famous wrestler. And The Rock had a lot of catchphrases. The one that was pertinent was the millions and millions of The Rock's fans screaming The Rock's name.
The millions of The Rock's fans surrounded by the millions and millions of Rock's fans.
And Deranged Hermit, of course, comes in with the 4 squirrel tokens. The Hermit dies a lot, usually because the caster doesn't pay its echo. And then Diabolic Servitude brings it back for another round. And as you get more Hermits, let them die, more Diabolic Servitudes. You got the millions and millions. So that's the whole origin of the deck's name. Now, over time, the millions part went away because Deranged Hermit plus Recursion was no longer part of the deck. But as the deck evolved into the Invasion block version, headlined by Spiritmonger and Pernicious Deed, still with cheap black discard effects and removal, into later, more modern Dark Confidant, Tarmogoyf, Liliana the Veiled versions. The millions, of course, went away. The Rock stayed, to where black-green mid-range is just the Rock now. I wrote an article about the deck, kind of a primer and a matchup walkthrough on a long-dead site called newwavegames.com in the summer of 2000, in which I said, the Hermit is the Rock and the tokens are the millions and the Plague Lord is the Undertaker. But, that article, if I thought it would be treated as canon a generation later, I probably wouldn't have been so specific. Honestly, if people think it makes more sense to call the Plague Lord the Rock, or not label any creature in the deck the Rock, just call it the deck the Rock, go nuts. I'm releasing everyone from the quote-unquote canon of Hermit equals Rock. It's whatever you want.
Yes. The Rock does want to retract his statement.
So if someone wanted to take the analogy, the deck name away from the wrestler and think of rock, paper, scissors.
How dare you?
Certainly scissors would be aggro, especially aggro with no reach, like the Stompy decks of its original time in Standard, and to a not quite as decisive extent, but still favorable for the Rock red-based decks, because you lock up the ground with your green idiots, and then Plague Lord pretty much drops the hammer, or Pernicious Deed and Spiritmonger drop the hammer, or Tarmogoyf in later times. Paper for the deck, various assorted combos, matchups where your suite of Doomblades, whatever they happen to be in that era, don't play. Those would be, or Tron decks. Things that attack from an odd angle, maybe not totally, because the deck does play, roughly 6 Thoughtseize effects. Even in its original day, it played 4 Duresses. So you had some game, but combo. Because in the original era of the Rock in Standard, one of the worst matchups was Yawgmoth's Bargain. And another rough matchup was Tinker, like what Finkel and Bob Maher used to make the finals of that year's Worlds, which are essentially Tron decks. So those would be your paper.
The Rock doesn't play games, but The Rock will make one exception for you.
As far as what current deck or recent decks are successors to The Rock, it kind of depends upon how you want to take the name The Rock. If you want to look at it broadly, dropping the millions part and just The Rock as black-based mid-range, then I think Jund is certainly Jund is just The Rock with more value tools and worse mana. I played a lot of Jund really from 2022 onward, because Brennan 6 was just such a huge pickup that I couldn't ignore it if I'm just going to play a mid-range value game. Whereas if you want to look at what's the successor to the original Standard Rock deck, Rock in his Millions, obviously that would be Yawgmoth, because the card Yawgmoth is just Phyrexian Plague Lord meets Dark Confidant.
Don't pretend like you don't know what The Rock is talking about. You know damn well what The Rock is talking about.
But most people don't know that Rock, or Rock in his Millions, was not the first deck that I built that was named after a wrestler.
Yeah, The Rock knows that.
Back in the 90s into the 2000s, there were state championships in Standard. And the second state championship was right after the release of Urza's Saga. And the big menace was the Academy deck. And I was theory crafting something that could actually tussle with Academy, and thought of the card Brute Maze, which forces all lands and artifacts, including their mana vaults that are prohibitive to untap, and Grim Monoliths, or that wasn't out yet, but Mana Vault, to come in tapped, which could really screw them over. So I threw together a green-red aggro deck featuring disruptive creatures like Scavenger Folk and Elvish Lyris to hit the mind over matter, and Mana Elves, and River Boa was still legal, possibly. And then the big get as far as rate creatures was Albino Troll. And red was for support cards like Incinerate and Fireslinger, but the Albino Troll, you might remember the art. It's this big jack-looking thing peeking out of a cave. This reminded me of Scott Steiner, Big Papa Pump. And so that was the deck's name, Big Papa Pump. And we didn't have enough. I was working with a few other people, and we didn't have enough copies for everybody. So I played some awful 5-color Tradewin pile that still managed to make the semis and lose to one of the 2 Big Papa Pump decks, who met in the finals. So the 2 finalists were playing the same deck, my deck, Albino Troll, Big Papa Pump.
The numbers don't lie. If you smell but The Rock